Hey, everybody. Welcome to the November client-only webinar. And there's a couple of you on here who are new. So I just want to recap. This is something we do monthly. And sometimes we do actually some additional subjects mid-month if there's something good and, important to talk about. But usually monthly, toward the end of the month, we move this one up a little bit because of Thanksgiving week. Usually it would be this coming Friday, which wouldn't probably work well for anybody. So we're doing it today, Monday.
Not if you're a Black Friday person.
Yeah. And so anyway, we cover, a range of different topics here. And so we have some things we're going to share with you for maybe 20 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up to questions.
And we have some questions that we got emailed in, which is another way to participate. So
That's
if
right.
you know you can't make this month's call or the next month's call, and you want to send some messages in, this is where we can address them for you. So just email them in and we'll get them on the air. So then you'll have a recording of them as well.
Right. And that'll be in the help resources section of our customer dashboard. I think you've both been there. If not, one of you has. So anyway, we'll cover that as well.
So today we thought we'd talk about holiday schedules and how to sort of manage that off time that happens occasionally when, it's Thanksgiving Day and I normally go live on Thursdays. Is that still a good plan? And so we thought we'd talk through, because we've been doing this in our podcast almost 3 years now. So we tried a lot of things over the years, and some of it worked and some of it really didn't. And so what's happened for us is that when you have a holiday, an actual holiday, and that's the day that your podcast airs, and you have one, okay? This is assuming you have one and you're planning to air it and you aren't taking a break for a holiday or anything like that, then air it on that date. Or if you really feel like you want to, air it the day before, but do not deviate from your schedule if possible. Because even though it's a holiday, people who look forward to it or might be traveling for that holiday will still download it and take it with them or listen to it later in the weekend. Or we found that we had once it happened on Christmas Day, and we had once that has happened because ours is a Thursday, so it always happens on Thanksgiving. And so our interview episode that we air on our 3D print podcast always airs on a Thursday. And we've never had it have low listenership ever. It's always had, and it may not have it exactly on that day, but it has it by the end of the weekend. It has the same listenership over the course of the week. So you don't want to lose that. You don't want to mess up the schedule and people think, oh, they flaked out on me, especially if they were counting on it.
Yeah, in fact, I would argue that holidays, usually during holiday time periods, the number of plays a podcast gets will increase, not decrease. People tend to have more time to catch up, to binge listen if they find you new. So it's definitely, I agree with Tracy. I would not alter my schedule just because of a holiday. However, I would plan ahead. And this is going to be a note for all of you in terms of your upcoming production schedule, especially in December. November, it doesn't affect things as much because actually most of our production team actually doesn't even celebrate Thanksgiving. So this week is not really any difference production wise for us, but coming up in December, just about everyone in our production team celebrates Christmas in some way, shape, or form, and we'll be taking some time off. So one thing you want to think about is one thing you really want to think about is submitting those episodes that we're going to air in late December and maybe even that very first week in January, to submit them early if you can. If you haven't if you aren't already that far ahead. I know some of you are. Some of you have so many episodes recorded ahead. We have some people who have recorded out through May next year, believe it or not. But some of you are a little more just in time, I guess I'll say, in terms of recording and submitting your episodes. And so if that's the case, you really by, that second to third week in December, you want to try to submit everything for production that you're going to need through the rest of the month and then through New Year's Day.
Yeah. So, and I want to mention to everyone that there's 3 issues on the side of what is a holiday schedule. Okay. So there's obviously the production side that Tom was just talking about. There's also the guest interviews. So you could get easily behind if you're scheduling interviews because there's lots of holidays and it's hard to get them scheduled. So we try to compact up early in December and open up more dates. So normally we would only allow 2 dates for recording, and we kind of force all of our interview subjects into those 2 dates on purpose. And it's just so that it manages them within our schedule. But in December, we open up more just so that we can get a little ahead because there's so many holidays in there and the production schedule. And so we really want to make sure. So we might open 4 days and allow broader booking, and we might invite 8 guests instead of 4 that we normally would in a given month. We also try to do that. For us, we do that actually in November because December's episodes for us are recorded in November. So it's like a month ahead of time. So, but just be thinking about that. So you have a guest impact, you have your recording schedule impact, and you have the production schedule. So just be thinking about that overall. But from all around, listenership is up. We believe in every sector. We haven't had a single industry sector or whatever I would call it category that has been low during holiday times. And we have and that's the same thing for my ink articles. This is the largest readership we have. And the good thing is that there are lots of other podcasters out there who aren't as committed as you are or as we are. You're supposed to turn off your sounds. How did it happen?
I did turn off my alert sounds.
The number one problem after all this time, and we have recorded 500 episodes, and Thomas, his notifications are still popping up.
It's on Do Not Disturb. I don't know what to tell you.
Turn your email off. And so anyway, number one rule on your to-do list when you're going to record. Anyway, what I was saying is that what we find happens is that this happens with my ink column. Other writers are kind of lazy during the holidays and they don't submit as many articles, and other podcasters don't commit to the time schedule and don't continue to post during the holidays, take it off. And that's totally fine if that's what you want to do. But the ones who do, they find new listeners. They find people who are, you're lonely over the holiday, you're bored with your family, there's lots of fighting, and plugging in sounds like a really nice way to get away, right? So all of those things actually are to your benefit if you do have, you just want to keep going. And so that's what we found, is that it has served us well. And because we record so far ahead, for us, that it's been a little easier to be able to maintain that. Those that, as Tom puts it, just in timers, when you do that, it's a little harder. And so, but a little planning and a little pre-thought in this can really make a difference for you. Now, there's something that we tried one year, and I just want to throw it out to you. Reruns. Reruns do not work. In fact, you get a lot of nasty backlash from dedicated listeners. And so we thought, because we had a lot of episodes at the time, we had like 300 or something like that. We thought we had 300, and they don't all show on iTunes. So they had dropped off.
Once you get over 300,
they start dropping off.
They will drop off. So anything 300 or higher, your first episodes would no longer be there. There's a way to do that.
Yeah, there's a way to handle that.
That's a discussion for another time. I don't think any of you are really at near that 300 threshold yet. So we'll save that for a future discussion. But we had new listeners who then couldn't hear some of the older episodes. And we thought, well, we've been doing 5 episodes a week for a long time, and we wanted to dial it back to 3. So we thought, all right, 2 days a week, let's run, one of our best episodes, highest download episodes. And there are some people that appreciated that, but all the longtime listeners really
hated it
not to have that happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is that there's a difference between, you're not rerunning it in your blog, and it's not rerunning via Google, because there's only going to be one blog post and one Google indexing of that. So it doesn't do anything for you there. And it's really only happening in iTunes that they're seeing it, or Stitcher or TuneIn or whatever the listing is, right? You're seeing it in your listing of podcasts. So now there is an exception to that. And that is if your episode is really timely and important. So we did that recently. So what was the name of the company that we did it for, Tom? Do you remember?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Oh, I'm referring to the company that did the 3D printing in disaster locations. Oh. Do you remember the name of the company? Anyway, it'll come to you. It'll come to you while I talk about it. Anyway, there's a company that we had interviewed in our first couple hundred episodes who had
Field Ready.
Field Ready. That's it. Thank you. Field Ready. And they did go into disaster zones and 3D print replacement parts and all sorts of things to help the grid get up or the water system get up, replacement joints, whatever might be needed. They print it on the ground there rather than have to wait for parts to get shipped in. And so it can renew disaster area zones, can get them up and running faster. Great mission, total nonprofit. Felt like it was really worth our while when they reached out to us and said, wow, there's been all these hurricanes. We need more funding. Could you push out a message for us again? And so we didn't have time, and the Field Ready CEO couldn't do an interview because he was in the disaster zone fixing everything. So what we did was we recorded a new introduction and a new bit of information about what they were doing and why they needed new funding. And then we added on to that the original audio. So we essentially created a new episode, but replayed that audio. So new listeners could listen to the whole thing, and those that may have remembered it, although it was like 200 episodes ago. So you might have wanted to refresh because it was timely and important. That's a good time to rerun something or replay it, and it's a good way to position it. So if, let's say, you are a relationship coach or something like that, and you run an episode this Thanksgiving about getting along with your in-laws and getting along at the dinner table, and you might want to run that again next year, that's perfectly fine. We think that's a great idea, but rerun it with something new on the beginning, some new insight or some new introduction to it. People won't mind that once in a while. They would mind it the way that we did it, which was like every Monday for 2 months. We repeated the episodes, and they did not like that at all. So just a plan for how to handle it if you want to do something like that for another year in the future.
I think that's a good suggestion, Tracy, because sometimes I think there are, like you said,
sometimes it's just
some
important.
Seasonal kind of issues that recur.
Or something happens in the news and it makes sense to renew something. Mm-hmm. You know, it really makes sense to rerun something because of that. But again, if you record that new, you're making it a whole new episode, and you just let our team know that part of it is, you know, reusing an old audio. They will not duplicate that part of the content on your blog post, so you don't get any Google trouble with that.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
So they know better than that. So that gives you something, an introduction section on it to have that audio play and still have that be indexed, even though it might be shorter than your normal post, which is totally fine once in a while.
I just want to, little quick side note here. I know a couple more people have joined the webinar live, and just want to let you know, if you're not already doing so, and if you didn't notice the little note in the email that went out this morning, click gallery view to see both me and Tracy. If you're
otherwise, you just get one of us.
Well, because yours and my audio is going through my feed. When you talk, it wouldn't bring up your video, so they'd be looking at me.
You're dominating all the time.
No. Look, this is our tech hack of the Zoom system to get this all to work. So hit gallery view, and you can watch both.
And you can see both of us.
All right, so there you go.
You can see me do what I do, which is hit the mic and do things like that, because I use my hands when I talk. And you know what? That's a good thing. Like, I just read something about that, about how you can be a better podcaster. And one of the ways is you can stand, which is a great way to do it. You can stand up and speak, because that's a great way you get more power in your voice. But also just let yourself go. If this is what you do and you talk with your hands, be animated, because that passion comes through that microphone. It comes through to everyone who's listening, and they appreciate that.
Especially if you hit the microphone.
Especially if I hit it, yeah. Just gives our audio team more work.
You know, aside from some of the holiday stuff.
Well, we didn't talk about taking actual vacation, though, and how you sort of set that up. I think we should mention that briefly.
Okay.
So it is not, there are many, many podcasters who do seasons. I mean, TV shows do it all the time, right? They take the summer off. We don't recommend taking long hiatuses. I mean, we've done it, but we don't recommend it early on when your show is established. We took a few months off because we got so busy with our daughter's wedding and everything going on, and it ended up being 3 months off, I think.
More than we
planned. We thought it would be a month, but it ended up being longer. And while we got lots of messages saying, "Are you coming back?" and they were very panicked about it, and we sent them nice messages back saying, "Yeah, we're just really consumed with our daughter's wedding, but we promise we'll have a great episode when we return about it," which we did, and they appreciated that. But having a plan and letting your listeners know that you're going to be off is really important. And if at all that you even want to, and you can, if you're going to take a month, more than 2 weeks off, okay, you're going to take a month off or longer.
From publishing.
From
now,
publishing,
let's be clear.
yes.
I mean, everybody takes time off.
Right.
You can store up a bunch of episodes and let them publish while you're on vacation. But
Absolutely.
This is if you're really taking a break from publishing.
Right. If you really need to take a break from publishing, or you want to take a break from publishing, you can change the description in your iTunes and have that last sentence of it say that you are on hiatus. And, you know, and you'll be return such and such a date. Because otherwise, when people look at this happens all the time, is that they're searching for episodes, and when they see some, or in a topic, and they go to someone's listing and they go, oh, they haven't published in a month, they probably aren't going to do it anymore. I'm not going to go to theirs. I'll pick this other person's to listen to. And so you don't want that to happen. So if you at least have that message up there that says, hey, we're on vacation, but we're going to return on this date, and catch up in our, on the archives in the meantime, or catch up in the back catalog. That's fine. You can do that. And then as soon as you return, you can change that description. It's not a big deal. It just pushes through from our site, from the Brandcasting U dashboard.
So, okay, so now I want to move on to a couple of more current issues. We've had a few customers write in who've noticed that in recent weeks they've seen a dip in their downloads of their podcasts, in their podcast plays. And we actually have seen this across a few different shows, and we have a theory as to why I want to share it with you. Some people are like, what's wrong with my show? Am I not doing the right things? Is my subject, not resonating anymore? What's going on? Because I had a lot of strong plays through the summer, and now I'm seeing a fall off. Well, so a few things have happened. We had a major update. Apple had a major update for their iOS. They went to iOS 11 for all the iPhone and iPad users. And with that were some major changes for podcasting, especially in their podcasting apps. And one of them, there were many changes, but one of them, I'm going to actually show you. I'm going to hold my phone up to the camera here and see how this works. But let's see if I can get this to show. If you have a podcast that you haven't listened to in quite a while, just from your schedule, you hadn't been able to download it, you might get this kind of message. This is something new that the podcast app is doing. Now, I'm realizing the way it's just showing, is that showing up where people can read it properly? Okay, when I see it, it's backwards, so it's throwing me.
Yeah, no, I can read it properly
so it
too.
says, hey, are you not interested anymore? Hey, you haven't listened to any of these episodes in a while, so they stopped downloading them. So the podcast
which
app
takes up less space, right? Because it was set to normally download 5 episodes or 10 episodes, whatever you originally set your settings to in the iTunes app. And so now they're not downloading them automatically if it's been a long time since you listened to it.
Right. So, if that is any of your listeners, as soon as they got this new iOS update and the new podcast app, if they haven't listened to you in a while, all of a sudden their phone's going to stop downloading your episodes. And that's why you may see a decrease in some, plays across your listeners.
But keep in mind that wasn't really a play. If they weren't listening to you anyway, it was a false play reading. So we were showing up plays and listeners who weren't actually listening to the episode. It was just downloading to their device. So it's helping to, the purpose of it, from what I've read, is that it's supposed to help avoid this auto download thing where no one ever listens to it, and then eventually they realize they run out of room on their phone and they start unsubscribing.
Or just deleting them, never having listened. So that is true, Tracy. So historically, and it still is true with other podcast players, I think Stitcher and
no, Stitcher doesn't do that. Stitcher does not auto download. You have to physically ask it to download for the most part. There are ones you can place in a special list, but you have to physically put it in a special list to get it to do it.
Okay, but what I was saying was that there are some podcast players that don't. That still are going to auto download every episode you publish if they're subscribed. And so that can give you actually an artificially high metric of how many downloads and plays you have. So I think in some ways this podcast app change with iOS 11 is making it so that they're trying to make the play statistics more accurate. Right. And people that aren't listening, they're not going to keep serving up and downloading them. And there's the disk space savings, obviously, on your phone, which actually is becoming less and less of an issue as every new phone seems to have 250 gigabytes of space now these days. So that probably won't be a big issue going forward. But in any case, they're not downloading them. Now, at the same time, while you may have a short-term effect of less downloads or less plays, as soon as somebody clicks that, says, no, I do want to keep getting them, and it's weeks or a month or two later, well, then they're going to get a flood of downloads, and you may get
unless they have set the restrictions, right? Which is the last 10. So they'll get a 10, but you'll still get a surge of their 10 episode downloads.
Yeah, I think most people don't actually set those things as much. They keep it with the defaults. You're kind of hyper detailed in that way, Tracy, but I think that
I don't want to mess up my phone and have all this junk on there.
Still, you'll get, while you may not get downloads for a while, you may get a flood of them at one point, and we do see that.
We do, yeah.
So that's something just to be aware of. That's been a big change, and why you might have seen something.
Of course, we're going to air an episode in the next week. Is it next week or something? But about Podfasters.
Oh, this is cool.
Which is something that's new term, which I actually knew, but I didn't know I had a term to it. It's people who listen to it, which is I'm guilty of it, listens to it on double speed or higher. And there are apps that allow you to listen to you up to 10x speed. Now, I cannot imagine how horrible that sounds, but that's like listening to chipmunks. But 2x actually isn't as bad as it sounds. I've listened to many, many podcasts on 2x, and they still are understandable and okay. And people do that. And these are the people who will binge listen and like to complete your entire catalog. Same people.
Apparently, it's like they're on a mission to complete
it.
So I just want to clarify for everybody watching now, when Tracy says another episode, we're not talking about a webinar like this. We're talking about an episode of our Feature Brand podcast. So that's going to be upcoming, I think, next week. After Thanksgiving, that this episode will air. So Podfasters, pretty fascinating learning about sort of these different I don't know if you want to call them classes or different markets of podcast listeners, and how many podcasts they listen to on a monthly basis. It's staggering.
Yeah. And just thinking about that though, these are, and you will have, the longer you do this, you will find, and if your show is the right kind of show, you'll have binge listeners. And that's when you'll see that sort of spike over a weekend or over, a holiday. You'll definitely see those spikes. And that's where they are actually listening to all your episodes, and they are catching up, and they are getting into all the archive episodes or the old episodes that they really wanted to hear, that are relevant to them. And you will find them that usually when they're done or partway through it, they'll start messaging you. That you'll know that you have some binge listeners, because we get that. It happens all the time. They get partway through and they're like, I am really so excited. I'm so happy I found this podcast, and thank you so much. And I can't wait to catch up so I can start listening to the new episodes or something like that. And it's a wonderful feeling. So I hope all of you guys experience that at some point over this holiday.
Yeah, well, and it'll happen at some point. It happens with every show when it reaches a certain level of maturity. And, I think on average, our podcast every day was downloading something like 2,000 to 3,000 downloads a day, and then all of a sudden we had this day where we had 18,000 downloads in a single day. It was like, what the heck happened? Where did that come from? Well, it's because it happened that a lot of people at that period of time were finding the podcast and then downloading every episode. And because we had 350 or 400 episodes at the time, you can imagine that starts to add up pretty quick. So you only need so many new listeners every day who download a whole huge amount of them in order to start.
But at least now with this change, you won't have false. You won't have people who are downloading them and not listening to them. So they're downloading them purposefully or because they legitimately want the show. Doesn't mean they always get to it. Like there's still always going to be that where they didn't get to listening to all the ones they downloaded to their phone. But at least they downloaded it purposefully.
I think if you do 1 to 2 episodes a week, your chances of your audience listening to every episode is a lot better. I think when you do 5 a week, like we had done for a long time, then I think it changes that.
They get overwhelmed and they fall behind.
So now I want to address a question that one of our clients had written in about, and it was a question regarding iTunes and ranking of podcasts, and asking about the importance of the difference between reviews and downloads. Ooh. And what's more important, and what really would help your rankings, to have more reviews or to have more downloads. And so that's a really good question, and I think it's a question a lot of podcasters ask. The reality is iTunes is we're really talking about iTunes here, because iTunes is by far the largest distribution channel for podcasts.
But I'm gonna pull up Stitcher so you can see it too. Okay. So I'm gonna pull up one on Stitcher.
But the reality is, iTunes in the past has not shared with you how many subscribers you have. You only have your download statistics, and you know how many of them came from iTunes. The reality is downloads, I think, are the most important metric, although reviews also help a great deal. Reviews are a lot harder to get than downloads. Certainly the more you have of each, the better you are. And then, hey, good, we're getting some questions in through the chat too, Tracy. So we'll get to that in just a minute, Mark, because it is related. But you do want to get as many reviews as you can, and obviously, especially as a new show, you want to get as many downloads as you can in the first 8 weeks, because that is what iTunes is looking at in terms of the new and noteworthy and what they're going to put up there.
Yeah, and the reality is you're competing against a lot of people whose PR firms or who agencies or who are working through them who are having them go live with 25 or more episodes. So it used to be, which is what we do here because it's manageable, go live with 3 episodes, because we somewhat ignore the new and notable for almost every category. It's not as critically important for the way that we do business because majority of it comes from Google.
Well, and it also used to be a lot easier to be seen in the new and noteworthy than it is now. They've reduced the number of shows they show there. It used to be there'd be 1,500 to 2,000 shows listed there. Every new show, basically, that was under 8 weeks old would be somehow listed there, and you could see where you are in it and make a difference. Now they show much fewer shows. They've changed quite a bit of that in the last year. So it's very hard. So I agree, Tracy. The only way you're going to get to the top of the download stats and the new and noteworthy with a new podcast is to launch with at least 20 shows and then to do 5 a week for 60 days.
And you have to push in reviews. So you have to get people to make reviews on you. And a lot of those, I hate to say this because Apple does not care. Almost all of those reviews are paid reviews. So people are pushing in and getting reviews that they've paid people to do from a PR firm's perspective. And so it's really, to me, it's inauthentic. It hasn't helped because people are coming in and that's why I want to show you what it looks like on Stitcher. This is the way most people search for shows. They don't necessarily go to new and notable unless they are browsing. But if you're looking for something specific, if you're looking for shows about pitching investors or shows about startups and VCs and things like this, I'm going to show you John Livesay's. And you might need to pull that curtain for me. Okay, so John Livesay's. So
that's good.
If you see it here, this, of course, he's listed under my clients thing, but you see up at the top where it has the successful pitch with John and it's sort of cut off. This is again, so it shows the description there. There's no review number. There's no stars. There's no information on Stitcher about any of that. And when it says details, it doesn't even show that show description. It's right into his episode, whatever that current episode is. So then you can go to the episode listing is the other way that you do it. And so you see the episodes. And again, there's no rankings, no pieces of information on here at all. And so you can see that mine are green and blue, which means I've either listened or not listened. So that's what it's doing there. But this is the way that almost all of the other ones work. Google Play works very similar. TuneIn works very similar. So you don't see any of that information anywhere but on iTunes, and usually only if you're searching through the desktop version. It's a lot harder to see, and you definitely can't make reviews and comments unless it's in the new iPhone, which I haven't tried.
No, you can. In their
the new
podcast app, you can make but here, the thing about reviews, and the reason they're so hard to get, is it's not so easy to do it. You have to go to the right place within the show's listing in the app or in iTunes itself on your desktop and go and intentionally go to write a review. So it's not as easy as, I'm listening to this episode. Oh, let me just right here type a review. No, you've got to dump out of the episode, go to a different part of the app and do it. So that's why it's hard to do. But Mark is asking, are the strategies I can use to get more reviews beyond just asking on his podcast? And there certainly are.
So I wanted to test out this sort of like, oh, are you paying for reviews kind of thing, and see if like anyone caught it or like there was anything or they delisted it or did any like that. And I went to Fiverr and asked 5 people to give us a review, and it worked. and they've been there the whole time. And it's, you know, so people do that. Athena Rosette, one of our podcasters who has the Alter Ego podcast, it's called the Alter Ego podcast, right? And she actually did a really great thing. She did kind of a little screen share video to show people how to go about actually leaving the review, and asked her Facebook friends to do that for her. So, or her Facebook fans, I should say, not just friends, but her fans, and to do that for her. And she got a lot of successful reviews that way.
But I think the most successful, other than what Mark is asking, other than just asking for a review on his podcast, which pretty much every podcaster does, and which is, you should. And
I don't think we ever did.
we did with our
I don't think we do.
WTFFF. I don't know if we do it too much with Feed Your Brand, but
no, I don't think we ever have.
The reality is, if you have something to offer, and actually just coincidentally, I'm going to hold it up here again. Ken Courtwright, who has Today's Growth podcast, I'll use him as an example because he did something like this.
Oh yeah, this is a good strategy.
A specific call to action. But he had other tools he could use.
He did it from a stage.
But he has books. He talks a lot from the stage, and he has his own events he puts on. And his events also, actually, they charge for people to attend his events. So I think he put out a call to action on his podcast. I think this was a year ago, if I remember right, where he was saying, hey, our digital footprint event that's coming up in October 2016. It's going to be in, I don't even know, where was it? Was it in LA?
Here.
Yeah, somewhere
Orange
in Orange County. And he has one on the East Coast another time of year. But anyway, he said, hey, if you want to come to the show, the cost is normally, I think it's like $595 or something. But if you will go and put a review up on iTunes for my podcast and screenshot it and share that review with us. So there was a little bit of action they had to take, and, you know, email us with that information, and then we'll give you a discount code and you can attend for $1. I mean, the reality is, you know, he does have other ways, and people can be guests to the event and not pay. The money for the event wasn't his biggest thing he was trying to achieve. He actually wanted to try to get more reviews to his podcast. So he was using a call to action to something he was willing to give away for free to get people to review his podcast. So it doesn't have to be that extreme as an event or something worth hundreds of dollars. It could be a book that you have. It could be, you know, if you're selling anything, it could be a discount to something. I'm trying to think, what are some other good examples, Tracy?
Well, but I also want to mention that one of the things that he also did was he was also speaking at a CEO Space event at one of the big week-long forums, and he, in both his keynote that he spoke at, and they have like almost like a trade show booth thing at the end, was doing the same thing. And and I calculated, because I measured it before he started and before he gave that throw, asking people if they got value out of his keynote, would they please go give him a review? And then at the trade show, he did the same thing, that if they made a review, then he would, you know, give them for $1, the tickets for $1. And so he did the same thing there. And in the keynote, he got 3 reviews. And I mean, this was an audience of 150 to maybe 200 people. And so he got 3 reviews out of it. It was not effective and not a very good. And at the trade show, he got, I don't know, maybe a dozen people. So it was a little bit more helpful, but it wasn't tremendously worth the effort for him.
Well, but over time, he was able to get it up. I think he has like 60 some odd reviews.
But it's been like 60 something for over a year. So maybe. Once he stopped trying, it just stopped working. So people just don't do it naturally. It's, you know, it's not one of those things. And, you know, don't be afraid about negative reviews. I rarely see them. People usually go in to reward you, to thank you for doing your show. They don't usually go in to rant about you. I don't see it that often.
But the other thing is, the reality is, in the very beginning, in the very beginning of your show, which maybe some of you are in that stage, not very many I think are, but some of you are in that stage. In the first 8 weeks, if you have a bunch of reviews within a short period of time, I think that can help your ranking on iTunes. But after that, I mean, the reality is, when you have a mature show and you're 20, 30, 40 episodes in, and you're not doing a daily, you're doing like 1 or 2 a week. When you're 20, 30, 40 episodes in, the reality is those reviews are not going to help you tremendously if you get a lot more of them, because once you have 10, 12 or more, the reality is people are just going to look through the first few, and unless they see a majorly negative review, they're going to say, all right, people seem to like this show. I'll go give it a shot. I'll listen to it.
And when we talk more about the Podfasters next week, you'll hear more about this. But one of the things that their criteria is that they like to look for shows that have 100 or more episodes. Because if you have 100 more episodes, you've done a good job and you've committed to it. And so that's really where we say, rather have you take your time, energy, money, concentrate your effort on creating more great content. Because the faster you do that, the more reward you receive overall from Google ranking, from listenership, from all of these things that happen. It happens better the more episodes you have. So you just got to get them under your belt. That's really the best way to go about doing it. I understand the need not to have 0 reviews at the beginning, especially. Sure. So make that happen, but you can do friends and family. And I had to, one of the reasons why I actually went to Fiverr to do that was because while I adore her and love her, my sister-in-law has the same last name as us. So to have her rave about us and review it was really nice, but it said Elsie Hazard. And I was like, that doesn't help us. And so I wanted to like push hers down in the list so that it just looked like she wasn't the only person who reviewed, but she was sitting at the top for so long. So that's really why I tried the Fiverr thing.
That's a good point. So you want friends with different names or families that don't share the same last name, tap all those people first.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Any other questions that we had, Tom, that we got from?
I didn't have any others written in.
Okay.
In terms of right now. So if any of you listening have any more questions, please type them into the chat and we'd be happy to address them.
Yeah, you'll be getting on that holiday schedule, by the way, you'll be getting an email out early next week from the team that tells you exactly when the last day for submissions. Think of it like the last day to ship before Christmas, right? So yeah, you'll have that. But if there's any problems, there's always somebody on call. There's always someone available to fix it if the episode went live and something wasn't quite right or whatever. There's always help to fix that. Don't worry about that part of it. We will always have somebody on. It's not like it's a ghost town around here.
No, it's just a matter of capacity for production right over the Christmas holiday. You want to get your stuff in early, which most of you have done. So let's see. What other have we gotten?
No,
I got somebody wants me to call them after. I will.
Yep.
For a specific question. That's great. Let's see.
I don't think there's anything else I have. I think that's probably it for now.
All right. Well, we'll give it just another minute here in case anybody else has a question they want to type in the chat that they're willing to type in publicly.
Yeah. Again, you can always email us at hello@brandcastingu.com and we'll get the message. And if it's urgent, of course, we'll answer it. And if it's something that can wait to these calls, we'll do that next month as well. So if it's just, these kind of things that like occur, like, oh, I'd randomly like to hear more about this. Discuss more about this. And if you have anything pressing, that's another reason, join the call next month. So I don't know when we'll do next month's call. Well, Alex, do you have the dates on that?
In December? Oh, we'll probably have to, I don't know.
Do you have December's date?
We'll probably want to do it before Christmas because that
Christmas is like a Monday,
that
isn't
week
it?
Between Christmas and New Year's is tricky.
It's scheduled for December 29th.
Here's a question. What's the general turnaround time once you submit an episode? You can tell this is a relatively new customer. Good. We like to have a week of time ahead to be able to produce your episode once you submit it. It doesn't always happen that way. We can produce it within, a few days, but it's always best to leave us some more time. And then so here's of course, what do you submit 5 at a time? Well, we're gonna do 1 at a time. So you want to submit them in order. You want them produced. And of course,
our team will also trump them if you have the dates. So like they kind of they'll level out which the due date, right? The episode air date will override it. So it actually doesn't matter what order you do it.
You're right, Tracy. I think I misspoke there. The reality is you always have to choose the publication date when you submit an episode. So make sure you're choosing the publication date you want, but make sure when you're submitting it, if you can give us a week at least, that's ideal. If you give us 3 or 4 days, we'll probably still get it done. But the closer you get to that date, the the reality is, depending on the workload at the time in production, it can sometimes, just be too much to get done in a certain period of time. And in that case, we give people options. Hey, we can get your audio podcast produced, within 48 hours and publish it, but your blog post may need to wait and publish a day or two later when it gets done, because more of the work that we do is in the blog posting part of it than it is in the audio show. The audio show stuff comes first.
So I always think about this in terms of like, if you're submitting a bunch at a time or whatever, and it's going to go in the order of when it airs. But if you're thinking about it and you're like, gosh, it's a little tight, or if this is a really important critical episode that you want to review the text of it. So if you really want to go through the blog post and review that and have enough time to do that yourself, you need at least 7 days in advance. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you may not see it it may not go in until midnight the night before it airs. And so just because of the timing wise of our production schedules. And so you don't get that advanced look at it the later you put it in the schedule. And so that's really I think the critical factors is how much review time do you want? Our team will work hard to make it happen for you. Mm-hmm. And if it's not possible, we will let you know right away and give you those options like Tom was talking about.
You're right. It is really, some people really like to review this stuff ahead of time. We're obviously happy to accommodate that. We put blog posts up in draft, and then you can review it well before it publishes. But when you don't leave us with a lot of time to do that, you don't end up having a lot of time to review things and make sure there aren't any minor changes that need to be made. We got a couple of good questions here from Deanna here in the end.
I just answered one of them. Yeah. So she asked, you schedule, of course, to when you want to review it or when you want to air it. If you're a person who wants to review it, that's sort of notated in your show. So like that's something that we did at the early intake, or it's something that comes across as we start to set up your show and work together, that, you like to have it 24 hours or 48 hours ahead of time because of that. And you're also on the practice of sending it in a week ahead of time. So it works for you. And so we note that in sort of your overall who you are and what your show's about. But when you go to enter that episode in, you must enter the air date, because the date that you want it live.
Right. But if you have any special notes that you want to tell us, things that, hey, maybe you don't usually need to review your shows before they publish, and you just have us schedule them to publish, or maybe you've reviewed them for a while, and then you get to the point where you're more comfortable with our team and you let them, all right, no, I don't need to review it, just schedule it and it's fine. But you have a particular one you do want to review in advance that for whatever reason.
Maybe it's a really critical guest, a really picky one.
All you've got to do is in the edit notes section, there is a button there on our new episode request form in the customer dashboard where it says for edit notes. And you can put really any notes in there you want to. There's a button you push and it brings up a text box. And, it doesn't have to be a particular edit note about the audio show. You can say, hey guys, can you please get this one to me to review by such and such a date, or I'd like to review the transcript, or whatever it is, whether it's the audio show or the transcript, or any special requests, just indicate them somewhere in that edit notes field is what I would do. And then
she asked earlier about bumping one for another. Yes. So address that one, because that happens all the time.
It does happen a lot. I mean, for instance, Tracy mentioned and showed you some screenshots on her phone from John Livesay's podcast, The Successful Pitch. This guy is an animal, and he records so far ahead. He's got one episode a week recorded through May 2018 already. And what'll happen is he's planned it all out, and he wants that to be his air schedule, and that's it. But then he gets a really important guest or something more timely that he just records now, and he doesn't want to wait till May or June to air it next year. And so, he'll bump the schedule. But what he's taken to more recently, because he likes everything to be organized and know when things are going to publish, he was publishing once a week every Wednesday. And then he had 4 episodes he recorded recently that he wanted to happen sooner. And instead of bumping the schedule, which you can do, you just need to indicate, again, when you submit it in the notes, the publication date, and hey, I want to replace such and such an episode with this one, or I want to move the whole schedule out and insert this one. You can do that. But what he decided to do is, I'm going to make these bonus episodes. For 4 weeks, I'm going to do 2 a week. And so he's doing one on Monday and one on Wednesday. So you have a lot of options there.
Yeah. And I just want to say that, while it's really great to be booking out in that far distance and it's a really great idea, when you're doing these guest interviews and you're building rapport with these guests, this is why it sometimes feels more urgent that you want to bump it. It happens to me all the time with my ink articles that I switch up the publication schedule and I push something up ahead of time because either it's timely or I just really want to serve back to the person who I interviewed and air them sooner because it would help them and I know it's going to build a better relationship with them. So when you have these long lead time on your schedule, then what happens is sort of they forget about you and you forget about them and you may have lost that momentum from that. So while we are all about and advocates about getting your topic episodes recorded, the interview ones, we don't like to go too far out in. We try to keep a month ahead of time, so that we're recording November, we're recording December, but we don't like to record, too far out on the interview ones just because it loses that timeliness and that momentum of them being excited about being on your show and pushing it out. And so it sometimes can have a lag. So you can just be careful about that. And that's really why John pushed up those episodes. He didn't want to lose that momentum and that relationship building because it was critically important to him.
But he certainly has a lot of other people he's interviewed that are out 4 or 5 months.
Right. And reality. It does. Yeah. So, and it's just the reality of it.
So we have a relatively new customer named Paul, and he has asked, as a person very new to podcasting, are there events or websites that I should be aware of in order to progress my efforts? And I would think, in order to learn more and educate yourself, I would think, yeah, there certainly are.
Let's qualify that. Paul, are you looking for educational events or websites, or are you looking for those that can help promote your show? Because that's two different things.
I think it's more the former. I'm going to guess, having spoken with Paul. Oh, both. Okay.
Okay, good. Right, we'll talk both. You talk the first one.
Well, so there are a lot of resources. There's actually probably too many resources, unfortunately. You're going to get overwhelmed. There are numerous podcasts about podcasting and mostly do-it-yourselfers learning to do all the steps in order to launch your podcast. And you've already gotten through that. Paul, you're already launched. Now, maybe there are some things that can be tweaked and improved, and we're working with you to do that, but you're already there. So you're not going to need to worry about that.
But that's why we developed Feed Your Brand as our podcast for you guys and for other listeners out there and for other podcasters out there, because there really wasn't anything concentrating on that sort of advanced podcasting, like after you get started. Most of it is focused on getting you started or how to get started. And so we just felt like there wasn't enough out there about how to keep it going and how to really get it to the stage at which it was building your business for you. And that's why we developed Feed Your Brand. I listen to tons of podcasts, and I've stopped listening to almost all of the ones that I used to listen to that related to podcasting because they were so repetitive at this point. I still find Pat Flynn massively interesting. But I find that the way that he podcasts is actually not very useful to someone who isn't smart passive podcasting. So in other words, you're not doing it just to get affiliates and just that. And the ones that are doing the affiliates, and you can see because they have all the same guests that they all share, when you start seeing that happen, it's a waste of time. You're just hearing repeats. But what we see there is that a lot of them have started to admit how bad it is that usually they have to sign up 60 to 100 affiliates just to make any money. And so that's not working for anyone. And that's not a model by which we have found works, at least not for any of the businesses that we've been working with. And so that's really where we feel it has fallen off, unfortunately. And so we're trying to fill that gap, and we're trying to bring in people who do also fill that gap. And I've got a couple of new ones that, that we're exploring and seeing if they work. And that's one of the things that we like to do is we like to try them out and then let you know if they work.
Well, the other thing I would say is whatever resources you may find, and honestly, Google is going to be a big friend to you here, as will, you could search on iTunes for podcasts about podcasting, but I honestly, you want to find the most recent, the most current information. Even something that's a year or two old is going to be outdated at this point in terms of podcasting.
So this book is a little bit older. Can you see the title?
Content Inc.
Yep. Content Inc. And it's Joe Paluzzi. And he has a podcast as well. I can't remember what it's called. but epic content or something like that. Anyway, I think this one's really good because there's a lot more in here about how to do more with your content, how to repurpose your content, how to push it out on social media differently, how to do a bunch of things. And, a lot of what we do for you is like probably half the book is what we do for you in terms of getting your content to be working on your site and everything. But it's how you push out those messages that you could do more with. That's where I would spend more time focusing on and looking for. So digital marketing about social push, about promotion, about launching, anything around those areas, PR and other things that you can do in there. That's going to be the most helpful to a new podcast.
So actually, I'm gonna take one step back about the first part of the question, which is about progressing your efforts, like to become a better podcaster. Number one, more mileage under your belt. Record more episodes as soon as you can, because the more you do it, the more comfortable you're going to get with it, and the better you're going to get at it. And I'm not saying you're bad at it. I'm just saying,
No,
everybody improves.
Yeah,
over time.
I cringe when I listen to some of our first episodes. Yeah,
really
bad.
But so that's the first thing is record more sooner, and then with regard. There was another. Wait a minute, I lost it. But there was another.
This is why we edit our podcast, and the video doesn't always work for us.
Live video doesn't help. Record more episodes, and that was it. Go and listen to other podcasters. Yeah. Go out and find. It doesn't matter what the subject area is. Go find some subject areas you have interest in. Type them into iTunes search. And find a couple of shows to listen to, and just spend some time listening to other podcasters, especially ones that have 50 or more episodes, and listen to them and how they
structure their show,
how they structure it, and their styles, and how do you feel they're being real and authentic, or do you think they're really putting up a front and they're kind of acting? I always think people should be more authentic and be themselves and not be trying to be any kind of persona. But just by listening, become a listener of this product that you're creating. And I think it will inform you a lot.
Yeah,
about
I
being
find
a better
so
podcaster.
Many people are like, yeah, I'm a podcaster, but I don't love podcasts. And I think in some respects that's a mistake, because if you're not even at least an occasional listener of them, you don't kind of see how it's progressing, see what other people are doing, see how advanced they are. That's really where I find I get the most out of it, because I am an avid podcast listener. But I also think, Paul, one thing for you specifically, I think that is going to serve you the best is that thinking about your early episodes, especially the first 25 to 50, when you think about that in the scope of things, if you approach it with the mindset of, I am serving my future listeners, I am giving to them because I know that will come back to me later with referrals, they'll recommend my show to other people. Thinking about it that way instead of this is a direct sell model, like I'm just directly going into it. When you think about your show as being a service to the audience you want to attract, it works every time.
And really, I think Paul's show is already set up.
I think it is
that way. Yeah, absolutely. So that's great. Now about promotion, in terms of trying to promote your show,
I think it has to do with the content too. Like, is it a business to business type show? Do you have a business to consumer type show? Is it a health and wellness show? Like, those matter as well, and really focus your efforts on the social that matches that.
But I also think that we've always found one of the best ways to spread the word on a budget. Look,
on a budget.
Promoting your podcast could be a whole hour or a couple hours of discussion on its own. So I'm just going to throw a couple of things out here in particular in your case, Paul, because you asked the question. Unless you're going to go spend a lot of marketing dollars just straight getting the word out in a traditional sense, which I don't think is really what you're talking about doing right now. There are many ways on a budget to spread the word about your podcast. And it's about two things. And you might want to go back and listen to some of our earlier episodes of Feed Your Brand if you hadn't, about guest strategies. So, interviewing people, like your show obviously is about people and recovery from addiction, I believe, right? And so if you're going to interview people who are always have gone through that journey themselves, they're probably, for the most part, are not going to be people that have the highest social media profiles or the biggest followings to push out your episode to. So it may not help increase your listeners. But if you mix in interviewing those types of people, which I think is very important, to have people give their testimony of the journey they've been on, right? And to help others who may need the same. It's very important. But I think if you
inspirational,
then have
high
other
value
people who are, either more well-known professionals who have maybe, even celebrities who have come through it, you may find you can reach out to some celebrities, and because they've been through their journey and they're willing to talk about it, they would come on your show. But whatever those people are, whether they're, other professionals in related fields, industries, that have large lists, large following, that you could interview, that's going to help promote your show the fastest, because they're going to push it out to their audience, especially with the ego bait that we do, which I know you haven't seen yet. That's coming soon to you. But the ego bait graphics are already starting to work. And then the other thing I would suggest, and this will be the last one, is position yourself in a place of authority as a podcast host and get yourself interviewed on other podcasts.
Yes.
And you can probably do that on a bootstrap without paying to do it. If you're not getting as much traction, there are companies that you can pay to get you placed on others' podcasts. You'll be surprised how effective that is for marketing your own podcast, not just in the short term, but in the long term. It'll still pay off 6 months, 9 months, a year plus down the road. We've done that to promote some of our stuff.
And it's worked really well.
Effective.
A friend of ours, Dustin Matthews, did 46 podcasts to promote his book launch, and it worked really well for him and really got a highly ranked. And so, yeah, it just, it really depends on where you're going with it. One thing that I'd like to add, Tom, to what you said though, about how you structure the show in terms of like getting these guests and other things, that just really pay attention to who's really influencing the subject matter for you. And if there is, there might be HR directors at various companies who have to figure out how to manage addiction recovery and other things within their corporations. That might be a great LinkedIn reach out, right? And just say, and all you're doing is you're reaching out to them and saying, hey, I have this program that you can listen to. It's totally free. You can offer it up in your HR newsletter, which almost every HR department at big companies have, where they recommend things like that. And, if you're having trouble with substance abuse or addiction or all of these things, here are some resources for you. And you could be their resource of choice. We have a podcaster who we did their back catalog for. And that's exactly, they went the total, I would call it the corporate approach to how they marketed their podcast. And they were an innovation podcast, but they went to the heads of design and the heads of engineering at all of these companies and had them recommended in the weekly email or newsletter or whatever. And they had tons of listeners from that. So that's an alternative way to go about it. And if you know the type of person at a company, LinkedIn's a great way, because you can just type that title in there, find them, friend them. When they connect with you back, all you do is to send them this message and to say, hey, this is my passion in life. This is what I've been doing with it. And I really think this might serve your employees really well to listen to my show. And that's simply it. And it's free. So there's nothing for them to feel like you pushed on them at that point. And so it usually response is really good.
So there's probably no end to the concepts that we could come up with for how to promote. I mean, there are so many possibilities and options, and not all of them are going to be right for you, but some of them will be absolutely right for you. We can keep exploring that, keep thinking about it, and keep talking about it. So
it gets started, and then as you get started, then we like to check in, and this is a new sort of program that we're employing as sort of an audit and check-in process with across. So there are 3 of us in the main organization at the top here, and
this location.
At this location, yeah, there are 3 of us then at the top. And what we decided to do is to sort of take all of our podcasters, and we're splitting them up, and we're going to audit your podcasts and make some recommendations. And then if it warrants, a strategy call, then we'll have a strategy call with you to help you to the next level, help you get you to the next level. Because we want you all progressing. We want you to all make it well past 100 episodes, and we want you to feel like it's been adding tremendous value to your businesses. We have some great podcasters who just keep telling us how fabulous it is. I mean, I'm really still very shocked at the local business podcasts, where you have a doctor who's in a localized area, and because I know that podcasts are so international, so I was pretty sure it would work, but I wasn't sure it would work as well as it has been for them. So we have ones that work in that way, and that's a totally different strategy than you do if you want to get national visibility or international visibility. So
well, you get international visibility whether you want it or not with a podcast.
That's right.
It's just a matter of, is it still going to be helpful for you? So anyway, well, I think that's going to be a wrap for this webinar. Thank you for sticking with us through the whole thing. Most of you did. I think only one person cut out, as we thought we might not have had any more questions to answer, but then it turned out we had a few. So thanks very much, everybody.
Yep. Thank you so much.
We will see you next month for another client webinar. Have some more hopefully good and valuable subjects to cover and discuss with you.
And happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. Bye, everybody.
Bye.